we keep referring to a book called Traction, and I'll just unpack that a little bit. The author is Gino Wickman, and he has several EOS books, so to speak, but the the book called Traction is really the A to Z heart and soul of the EOS system. There's other EOS books that he wrote that are kind of supplementary that kind of help EOS through different windows. But if you're looking for it, it's called Traction. And subtitle is Get a Grip on Your Business.
It's time for another episode of Rainmaker for Contractors. Interviews and success stories with $1 million plus basement waterproofing and foundation repair owners. Discover how they market and grow their companies in today's economy. Hear directly from the most successful leaders in your industry. With your host and Rainmaker for Contractors owner, Bill Crawford.
What's up? Welcome, everybody. I hope you are having a great day today. I'm really excited to have Tom Trinko from Basement Repair Specialist on our podcast today. And we're going to be talking about entrepreneurial operating system. I had heard that Tom is using EOS to manage his company, and I just did a webinar training on EOS and how it can help basement waterproofing companies. So I thought having Tom on this podcast would be just an overall excellent experience. Tom, welcome to the podcast. How you doing today?
Great, Bill. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. I'm excited to talk to you today. Hey, before I ask you some questions, Tom, let me give kind of a brief introduction to those who are not familiar with the EOS. EOS stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System. And what it is, it's kind of a management system that helps you manage your company. It has timeless concepts and lots of proven tools to help you scale and put systems in place so that if you're the owner, you're not running around like a fireman trying to put fires out all the time. You're able to build a leadership team and empower them and create systems and scale and grow. And I think that's what the majority of us want to do. And so that brings us over to Tom. Tom, can you tell us a little bit about your basement waterproofing company?
Yeah, Basement Repair Specialist was founded in 2010. We're in the eastern Wisconsin market, and we do the basic waterproofing and piering, structural repairs, egress windows, the things that most basement waterproofing companies in our industry do. And we have, in the past couple years, decided that we wanted to take the company to the next level. We've always been pretty profitable, a strong company. We do good work and everything like that, but we decided to take it to the next level. And that's where EOS came in.
That sounds awesome. And let's see, how long have you had this company and how did you get involved?
We started in 2010, and I was initially an investor in the company. I didn't have a background actually in contracting or building or anything like that. I had some experience in sales and in marketing and owning another organization. And we had a rental property that we needed to do a basement repair on, and ultimately ended up working with a couple of fellows that became my partners at that time. And that's how the company started. Basically, I took my marketing and sales background and their knowledge of the industry, and we created a company out of it.
That's awesome. You have a unique story. Most people that own waterproofing companies somehow were in the business working for somebody else, and they're like, I could do this better. But hey, I think you mentioned to me once when you were kind of shopping around for basement waterproofing, I think you saw some things in the market. I wasn't planning on asking you this, but I thought it might be a good setup a little bit. Do you remember that? You saw
Yeah.
kind of some weaknesses and you thought like, hey, there's some opportunities here. What did you remember seeing?
Well, I remember seeing that there were a couple companies in the business that have been around for a long time that do have systems. And then there's that other group that don't have any systems that are, we like to call them truck in the truck, and they go around and they could do basement waterproofing or wash your windows or clean your car. They really aren't in the basement waterproofing space, so to speak. And I just saw that we could take some systems that I learned in, my corporate background, in a small scale, and be profitable without necessarily scaling up to a really, really large organization. You could take the processes that a large corporation uses. And what was lucky about that is technology keeps on dropping in price, and the strength of it for a small entrepreneur really is on the scale with a very large corporation now. 20 years ago, it was CRM would have cost, you'd have to develop that in house by yourself, and it would have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and be very hard to justify. And now you can get a CRM and you're looking at a cost of, $100, $200 per user per month, something like this. And it's totally justifiable. So we were a little ahead of the curve on that, I think. And that was very helpful to our business growing.
Well said. There was a day back then when it was just Salesforce or nothing kind of a thing, and who could afford Salesforce's Fortune 500 companies, and that's really well said. Technology is really inexpensive, and it allows a smaller contractor to be very organized. So that's great. Hey, so EOS, so some of the things that I mentioned in the webinar training, there's 3 things that I focused on, and I have really experienced scalability and systems and empowering, our leadership team, so it doesn't feel like I'm always the one with the vision and I'm always the one trying to get everyone else to do things. And that is the level 10 meeting, which happens once a week. It's a very important meeting. We want everyone there, and there's a format to follow. One of the things inside that level 10 meeting is scorecards. And what a scorecard is each person on the leadership team is reporting key data points, key KPIs that explain how we're working on the business today. And are we hitting our goals? Or are we not hitting our goals? And then the third one are rocks. And rocks are the biggest priority over the next 90 days for each person, for each department. And we want everyone on the leadership team to kind of chip away at those rocks so that in 90 days from now, and we all know time goes by fast and business is busy, it keeps us very busy. So we try to carve time out to work on the business. And when we have clarity on those rocks and we know what they look like, so we can say in 90 days, yes, I accomplished this rock, we look back and we say, wow, like, look at all that we created and look how far that we've come. And then when you chip away at that each quarter, you really gain traction and your company goes forward and you create better systems and it's scalable. And that's been really exciting for me to experience in EOS. And I know that you are working on EOS. Can you mention some things that you've experienced in a positive way with EOS?
Yeah, well, all of that is so well said, Bill. I mean, that's exactly what our experience has been. We started in January of this year, actually, and we've implemented about 80% of what we're, supposed to implement from the traction book. And one thing that you just mentioned that really I just thought of was in that 90-day, when you're living in that 90-day realm where you're doing your rocks for 90 days, it's not unlike going to university or high school or whatever. They break it out into quarters, and there's a reason they do that. You learn a lot better and you can evaluate where you're at a given point in time versus just going for a whole year and then at the end of the year going, what happened? And this is sort of from education, obviously, but it's no different in a business. It's easier. Let's say one of our rocks right now is to redo the employee handbook, or the office managers to redo the employee handbook. That seems like not a terrible task or whatever, but 90 days seems like plenty of time to get that done. So you can get buy-in from people in the organization to get that done. And then there's a time definite when it's going to actually happen. Because a lot of times you write stuff down on a piece of paper and it's like, well, I'd like to do this, 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 and this. And then you look back 8 months later and you're like, wow, we ran out of time. We never even got that done. So there's magic to putting it on paper, getting people to commit and getting buy-in where everybody in the organization is saying, yeah, let's do that. Let's make it happen. And if it doesn't happen, by the way, then we move it. It's not going away. It's going to be there next quarter if we think there's a good reason, or if you're incapable of getting a rock done, maybe you're not capable of working for us. And so it allows you to make sure evaluations of where people are.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, if I could say something about rocks, it's I've led EOS in several different types of groups, and we always say this, when you're first leading a group with rocks, the first time you set up rocks, you fail miserably. It's just part of
Yeah.
the plan. Either you look at the rock and you're like, "Well, that's not a rock. I mean, you could do that in 3 hours, like, just go do it." Or it's not defined in that in 2 weeks from now, you're gonna learn it should be a different rock because of what you don't even know. It's like a research project, and you can't even say at the end of 90 days, "Hey, there's clarity as to what it is." That's definitely one of the shortcomings of rocks. I like my team to make suggestions as to what they think are the best rocks in the next quarter, and then we talk about it, and sometimes they're really spot on. It's really exciting to see a lot of I've always believed the people on the front lines have better insight into the issues than I do because I sometimes feel like I'm in my ivory tower. And so it's really exciting when someone says, "Hey, I'm seeing this, and I think we could really improve on that, and it would look like this." I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome." And other times, rocks ultimately need to line up with the bigger picture of where the company is going. And I do feel like the owner holds that vision, and the owner is kind of steering and aligning the leadership team towards that. And that's a different aspect of EOS, vision tracking, and so on, that you kind of do in the initial stages. Have you had any issues with rocks? Have you set them up? Either, they're too small, too big, wrong ones, too many, not realistic?
Oh, 100%. And they talk about that in traction that as you get going, just start getting going. Try to get going because some of this terminology, it takes a little while to understand really what it means. You understand it intellectually, but in the actual movement of the day and how a meeting runs, it operates a little different. So it's really important to define that over time. And they talk about in the book, they're like the first several times you roll out rocks, they're going to not be very good. And you'll look back on and say exactly what you were saying. That's not a rock. Should be on the to-do list, or it should be a score. It's kind of a scorecard item or whatever. And so you end up redefining and honing that in. And it reminds me of from the E Myth. I don't know if you've read that book
For sure.
before, Bill.
Absolutely.
And they talk about the whole idea of create a structure for your company. You need a accounting department, you need an HR department, you need a sales function, you need a operations function, right? You may be the only employee, but you still need to define that those are the sections of the company that eventually when you grow, people will go in that spot. And I think it's the same thing with EOS is just start putting some rocks out there. And when you realize they're not the best, modify. But that
Mhm.
doesn't take away from the validity of the exercise at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We keep referring to a book called Traction, and I'll just unpack that a little bit. The author is Gino Wickman, and he has several EOS books, so to speak, but the book called Traction is really the A to Z heart and soul of the EOS system. There's other EOS books that he wrote that are kind of supplementary that kind of help EOS through different windows. But if you're looking for it, it's called Traction. And subtitle is Get a Grip on Your Business. So
Yeah, the other one I would recommend that I just actually finished up is Rocket Fuel, which is a really good discussion about usually the entrepreneur is going to be the visionary. They're the person that has a lot of the ideas and everything. And they really need someone that's an operator to work hand in hand with them. It's not sufficient to just have great ideas. The execution is really important. And a lot of people that have a successful company, they're pretty darn good at operating, but they're not operators. And it's just a really great discussion of historical examples of really good partnerships in large companies and small, where you have the visionary that was coming up with the ideas and the new way of doing things. And then there was one person that was just like the steady force that's making sure stuff happens. And I'd recommend that. That's a great book.
absolutely. Well said. I'm glad you threw that in there. We owners are visionaries. We really are. And you've got to have that person that implements, operates, and does the day-to-day stuff. Excellent compliment to that. Let's see, how about we take a scorecard? So scorecards, I'm curious how scorecards may have helped you provide better quality service to your customers. Now, I realize I kind of putting you on the spot with that question. That's been my experience because it kind of gives me a stronger pulse of everything that's going on a weekly basis. Have you experienced that at all?
Yeah, because one of our scorecard items is how many Google reviews we received in the prior week.
Great
And
example.
yeah, and so that goes all the way into, for example, we discuss with customers that we're going to give you a 5-star experience. Whether you review us or not, we're going to give you a 5-star experience. And if we haven't, we want to know about it. And we're not perfect. We have instances where we've got something that goes south, and but we do try to rescue it, and we try to make every customer happy. And having that out there every week that you're saying how many reviews did we get gives you the opportunity to review and compliment people on good behavior, right? And it just keeps it front and center that it's important to us that we get good reviews from our customers, both from the sales standpoint, how the salesperson treats them, as all the way to the installers and how they behave in the during the installation and subsequent to it. So that's been very helpful to us. That's one example from the scorecard. Absolutely.
That's great. I love that. Really good example. Boy, I think reviews should be on every single scorecard in the basement waterproof on home services. It's just too important today. Got to have systems. You got to have a whole company culture that is focused on reviews for so many reasons, which I won't get into. Hey, there's a couple other aspects of the level 10 weekly meeting that I absolutely love. They're little, but to me, they're a big deal. And the first one is we always start out every meeting, everyone shares like a personal win and a work win. And I think the personal win allows us to kind of connect with people and get to know them a little bit outside of work. I think us owners sometimes are so focused on the business that we lose the people aspect of it. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard things where I'm like, whoa, like I didn't realize this person either has this going on or is super passionate about something totally not related to work or is struggling with something. I love that. And then I also love the business win. Um, Now, I've read a number of studies that talk about when you start a meeting with a personal win like that, it's going to lead to a more productive meeting. And it's very different than the owner just starting and talking and everyone's passively listening and watching and they're not contributing. But when you're starting out, or everyone's contributing and everyone's starting on a positive note, I love that little thing. And you're done in 5 minutes. I try to get everyone to not, not too long of stories there because we have a lot to cover. But do you start your meetings that way?
Not exactly like that. So that's something that I'm learning here that would be really helpful. We do that. There's a second segue area where we do talk about like wins, and then, but I throw it more. I don't do like everybody share one and one. I just, hey, anybody want to tell a story or say something positive about their team members? That's usually the context we get. Like a lot of people bragging on their people that report to them,
Nice.
sort of stuff. But I like that idea of sharing a win personal and a win in business. I think that's a really good idea.
Awesome.
We've had several listeners express interest in being guests on our podcast, and we think that's fantastic. If your company generates over $1 million in revenue and you believe you have valuable insights to share, we'd love to hear from you. Additionally, if you are a supplier to the industry and want to explore partnership opportunities with Rainmaker, we're open to discussing collaborations. Finally, if you're a basement waterproofing or foundation repair contractor looking to boost your online marketing efforts and generate more leads, reach out to us. We're here to help you grow.
Now, there's one other aspect about level 10 meeting that I like, and that is at the very end, we always say, okay, why don't you go around and rate the meeting 1 to 10, 10 being it was a great meeting, 1 it was horrible. And I'm always asking for, open and honest feedback. And, usually get like an 8 or 9 or a 10. And if I hear a high score after I get everyone's rating, I'm going to say, hey, Joe, you gave it a 10. Why was it so good that you gave it a 10? Or if someone says like a 7, hey, what could we have done differently to make that a 10? Like, where did we miss it? And I want to hear that feedback because I want these to be great meetings. I want these to be the most important. motivating, effective meetings that we have all week. Do you do that at all at the end? Kind of ask the team to rate it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. We do that with the L10 meetings. We do that with the quarterlies, which are basically a longer L10 meeting. We did that actually on our first rollout meeting. So we asked for feedback on how the meeting went. And generally, really positive. That's the thing about these meetings is I don't think we've ever had below an 8 from anybody. And I think it's because everyone's getting a chance to participate. It's predictable what's going on. There's no surprises. It's difficult for the meeting to go off on tangents, and it can, but if you're staying on top of it, so it's productive. And it's just because everyone understands the framework, but as you get better and better and better at it, you start executing better as a group. And there's a lot of satisfaction in executing well as a group. Obviously, that's the whole idea of a company.
Absolutely. Yeah. One of our core values is open and honest communication. So if we have a rating below an 8, it's usually me. A couple of meetings ago, I kind of stirred the pot, and I had just come back from a internet marketing conference, and they're highly motivational. And I said, "Hey guys, I'm kind of feeling like this meeting's flat. Like, what's going on?" It was good in the second half, but in the first half, I just felt like people were going through the motions. And I said, maybe partly is because I'm coming back from a conference where everything was like high voltage, or maybe we're just kind of had a meeting off. But I want to create that environment where people feel safe to say, like, I gave it a 6. If I hear a lower score, even though I've said this, it's not about you. Sometimes people will give a low score because they felt they didn't contribute as much. And I'm like, all right, it's not based on like whether you contribute or not. Like maybe the topics weren't as relevant to what you do here at the company, but it's more about, did we identify issues and solve them? Did people participate? Do you feel like we made progress? That's how I want our team to evaluate the company. Now, there's tools in EOS that are really helpful. Can you tell us about the tool called the People Analyzer?
Yeah, the people analyzer is basically a matrix where you put plus, plus, minus, or minus, meaning someone is exhibiting that attribute, or sometimes does and sometimes doesn't, or never does, or rarely does. And that's reference to your values. So you come up with your core values. For example, ours, we have honesty, professionalism, hard work, excellence, and growth orientation. Those are our values as a company.
Nice.
So you can take those core values and you put them on this matrix and you say, hey, is this person professional all the time, or most of the time, some of the time, or rarely? And obviously the ones that are getting minuses in some of these categories are probably not good fits for your culture, because that's exactly what the tool is meant to designed to measure is, are you living up to the culture that you've all created? And by the way, the culture is created by the group. I didn't get in a room and say, okay, here's our values, guys, let's go do it. We sat around and we didn't even vote. It was really interesting to be in a group of people that I've worked with for a little while, or a long while in some cases. And we were all pretty much on the same page, which was really cool to find that out. But we weren't like voting, hey, is honesty something that we should have as a value or not? It was like, yeah, that's one of them. And so those are your values. And anybody coming into the organization or that's already in the organization, we want to measure not on a scale of 1 to 10. It's just, do they do that? Do they really do that value? And if it's honesty, you probably don't want anything but a plus. A plus minus, not good. And they're honest part of the time, that's not a good one. But if you have something like growth orientation, you might have a new person coming in, they're just trying to get their young family fed and they're trying to make ends meet. And they're not really in that, hey, what could I do someday mode? They're figuring out what they're doing right now. That one you could look at and say, maybe this is a diamond in the rough that we can get into our culture and get them to believe. So that's how we've been using it. And it's been eye-opening in a way, because we can look at something and we maybe would have tolerated a certain kind of behavior before we started using that people analyzer tool. And now it's like, no, we're not going to put up with nonsense. If it's not within our core values, you're not adding to the culture, you really shouldn't be a part of our organization.
For sure. I think us seasoned business owners can look back and realize, boy, when we all have stories, when we let that person go, there was a black cloud that left the company and everyone felt better. And the people analyzer to me is a good way to kind of try to get those people out earlier. I like the documentation. I also personally I like the accountability that it forces us to sit down once a quarter and have a brief conversation with our team to say like, hey, just want to check in. We ask them to evaluate themselves and then we get that back and it opens the door and creates a conversation about that. And you mentioned core values. I love your core values. And I also love what you said about your team coming up with core values. Because obviously, if you're doing it together, there's going to be way better buy in. And that's different than the visionary again, the dictator saying, like, these are our core values. Now get with the program. I mean, if you want to be the owner that tries to put everyone on your back to carry everyone around, like that gets tiring. But if you could learn the art and skill of leadership in empowering other people, that's going to be a way better situation for you. And I think you're going to grow a lot bigger and faster that way. So your core values are great. I always, when I talk about core values, this is the cynic in me. I think in larger companies, there's always two sets of core values. There's the core values on the wall, and then there's the real core values. And the real core values are the ones that we really live by, because you could say, oh, those are the nice core values, but then everyone contradicts them and no one really lives up to them. Um, so I do try to create an environment where people can work. And I like to sometimes I'll start a meeting, not a level 10 meeting, but I'll say, hey, can anyone share examples of when we lived out our core values in the last month? And it could be like you mentioned, Google reviews. Oh, we were so professional on this one job. We were working hard and or we're growth oriented, and they could share specific examples, and that's awesome. And I do like to ask, can anyone share examples of when we didn't live out our core values? And to try to bridge that gap between the ones on the wall or the ones we agree to and the ones that we live out on a day-to-day basis. I have one colleague that has an automated email that gets sent out every late Friday afternoon, and they have to fill that out. Name two examples where we lived it out and two examples where we didn't. Tries to keep it real. So I like that. Can
That's
you
good.
mention yeah, it's fun. There's just such great tools inside here. Can you mention do any other tools come to mind or any other comments that you have about EOS that you have found helpful for your company?
Well, actually, if I can just go one more on the people analyzer tool, we actually did
Sure.
a little exercise where I was explaining what these values were because you have it in the management team the leadership team has this stuff pretty well ingrained, but then getting it to the folks that are, working on the crews or whatever, you're relying on their manager to explain these things. So you want to have a rollout with everybody in the group. And we actually took Google reviews and gave examples where people were mentioned in the review. Like, for example, Bob went out and did a sales presentation and figured out that the problem that the customer was having was their gutters, and we don't sell gutters. And it had nothing to do with their basement system, really. And so instead of selling them a big, waterproofing project like some people would, he said, listen, here's what you got to do. You got to clean out your gutters, got to do this and this, keep my number handy. If that doesn't solve it, call me right back. Right. And so the person gives us 5-star review. And it was like perfect example of honesty, right? We didn't sell them something they didn't need. And then we talk about Francisco. The customer says he came in and he did a great job. He was explaining everything, telling us what he was doing when he was doing the crack injection, why he did it the way he did it. And that made them very comfortable with the fact that they had purchased from us, because what they heard from sales was exactly what they heard from production. And they called him out by name and they said, hey, this is professionalism right here. And so we went through, and I was able to find every single core value in our Google reviews. And I'm guessing that anybody in this business that knows how to get Google reviews has that same tool available to them. Just go through your Google reviews and find people doing your core values and put that up on a PowerPoint because it's powerful stuff.
I love that. Nice job. That's an excellent one. That's really good. It makes me it reminds
Absolutely.
what's that?
It's fun too because they get involved and we try to send out an email and everybody, when someone gets called out in a review, we try to brag about that to everybody in the company, but to have it in a formal presentation in front of everyone and have it come out again, or for people that haven't been in the business, haven't been in the company for maybe they're a brand new employee. It just, people like being bragged about, and rightly. I mean, when we perform, like, that's awesome. It's great for business and it's great for the customer that they had that experience.
There is a Harvard Business Review article that talks about what employees want the most is acknowledgement. And I love that you figured out a system and how to give positive acknowledgement to people. That's great. Nice job. And this whole people analyzer system, I believe Traction and Gino Wickman talks about this. You got this from Jim Collins, Good to Great, and it's getting the right people in the right seats. And when I owned my waterproofing company for 15 years, I mean, I could tell you there was a season when everyone on my leadership team was the right person. And to me, the trick in basement waterproofing, we talked about this, is having all four wheels on the car going the same direction. And
Mhm.
sometimes you get like production's jamming out and maybe leads are jamming out, but your sales reps just can't sell. Or you might have a really well trained sales force and production's doing well, but you just can't get leads. Or one of the two. And so often, there's a flat tire somewhere. But anyway, if you get the right staff and you really live out these core values and you hold people accountable to what your culture is about, what your company is about, and where you're headed, you're going to get there a whole lot faster. I love that. I'm going to ask you one last question before we wrap up. But before I forget, I do want to mention that we recently did a webinar training all about EOS. So if you want some more examples of what it looks like for EOS in a basement waterproofing system, I have a scorecard, which for each point of data, I tried to make it applicable, one for production, one for sales, one for scheduling. And I also put some rocks in there. And of course, your scorecard and rocks will probably look different, but I thought these would be good basic ones for the basement waterproofing company. So take advantage of that. Tom, any last thoughts on EOS before we wrap up? Any other great nuggets of wisdom that you could share on how it's been helpful to your company?
Well, it's been super helpful to our company in terms of especially KPIs. The scorecard, has been instrumental in changing the way that we run the business in terms of just one simple example is we set a certain number of leads as our goal, to set a certain number of appointments every day, no matter what. And that just changed dramatically the number of appointments we had as a company because before it turned out it was, I don't want to say it was an afterthought, but it wasn't like something that there was a huge sense of urgency. If like the office manager needed to pull a permit or something like this, they might go and do that instead of like try to make one more phone call to one more customer to try to set one more appointment. So we set a goal of X number of leads per day and we're hitting it. And I asked, I said, has that helped? And they're like, yes, it has helped because they know it's sort of a game. At the end of the day, they're like, oh, we're one shy. Let's figure out a way to do it. And they figure out a way to do it. And so the scorecard, like having a number that people can look at and understand that makes a difference, gets you looking at the day in the day, not at the end of the month, figuring out why didn't we set more appointments? And so it's been super helpful. That I'd say that's the biggest part of this is the scorecard. And then those L10 meetings, just every week getting a checkup on where you're actually at as a company and how everybody's feeling about things is really instrumental in growth for sure.
Wow. All right. I am going to make one more comment, and that is Tom, I feel like we're spokespeople for EOS. Right. We're really bragging about it, and it is a great tool. And I am not certified, and I know you're not either. But to hire an EOS certified person to help implement this, I think it's very expensive. Something like 25 or $30,000, and with it, you get 4 2 or 3 hour meetings or something like that. But you're an example of someone that just read traction and just started implementing it. Now I know when you had the company, you had some systems in place, but I heard attraction from I have a colleague in my space who bought the book, and actually he didn't really read it. He gave it to his operations manager and he said, "Read this." And that operations manager implemented it in his company, and that company took off and they start really scaling. And oddly, that employee has now left and he actually helps other companies implement EOS, and he's not certified as well. So you can just buy the book and start implementing it. Um, so, Tom, thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast. It's been really insightful, and I love that you are sharing really specific examples of how EOS has helped your waterproofing company.
Thank you,
Yep.
Bill,
Yeah,
for
you
the
bet.
opportunity. I really appreciate it a lot. And thank you for the idea on the one good example of something that is good in your personal life and one that's good in your professional life. I'm going to definitely use that.
I hope it helps. Hope it helps. If anyone out there needs any help with digital marketing, please let us know. We're here to help you and to help your company grow. And I hope you have a great day. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the Rainmaker for Contractors podcast, where basement waterproofing and foundation repair business owners and industry experts share marketing and sales information that helps you reach more customers. Please leave us a review on iTunes or your favorite podcast platform, and get all of our show notes at rainmakerforcontractors.com/podcast.